めてみることにしよう。
Now, examine the film frame by frame.
フィルムを一コマずつコマ送りにしてみる。
It is discovered that the actual disappearance occurs in only one frame, in less than 1/20th of a second. After extensive analysis was completed on this segment of the film, it became clear that there was no trickery involved. Now, examine the exact moment that the UFO reappears. This time as well, there is no detection of trickery. Surprisingly, when the craft appears, the frame becomes very bright. This means that there is some type of energy affecting the film itself. It occurs within 1/20th of a second, the exact time required for the ship to reappear.
Welcome to the UFO Show. Tonight I will present an interview with Philip Imbrogno, who co-authored the book Night Siege, The Hudson Valley UFO Sightings, with Dr. Alan Hynek. Philip Imbrogno was the principal investigator of a wave of sightings that occurred between 1983 and 1988, centering in the Hudson Valley, but extending over a wide area, including parts of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Long Island, all the way down to Virginia, actually. Here is a map showing the area with New Jersey to the left, New York in the center, and Connecticut to the right, Long Island to the bottom. The circles designating the center of the activity in the Hudson Valley. Between 1983 and 1988, over 5,000 people had reported seeing a triangular or boomerang-shaped object as big as or bigger than a football field. Phil Imbrogno has been attempting to determine the reason why this craft had concentrated itself in the Hudson Valley. It has arrived at some truly remarkable findings. Philip Imbrogno. And did they just begin in '83, or has it been going on much longer than that?
Well, the sightings in the Hudson Valley have been going on periodically, off and on, for the last 30 years.
Oh yeah. Same craft?
Yes, I believe so. Of course, 1983 was the big wave sightings, going on all the way to 1989.
Do you have exact figures for reported sightings per year? What is it,
sure.
83, how many?
83, there were at least 2,000 reports.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That came in through what channel? To you?
Some of them came in through me, but most of them were made either to law enforcement agencies or radio stations or newspapers. Also, at that time, 1983, we had 3 phone lines that were hotlines, and they just rang continuously for 10 hours a day for about 2 months. We tabulated as much information as we can in the computer. From 1983 to 1984, there were 5,000 sightings, just alone. And these are reports that we were able to get. I mean, you know, they say only about 10% of the people who see UFOs ever report them. So this may be true. These statistics may be true.
Then you're talking about 20,000.
Yeah, you're talking about a great number of people who have had sightings of this particular UFO. But it's been going on off and on for the last 20, 30 years. Going in newspaper clippings in the 50s and the 40s and so on from the area, we find out that the same thing has happened, but never to this magnitude that occurred, especially in 1983, 1984, and in 1987.
Okay. And then it just simply stopped in '87? When there was a wave, in other words, when did it, when did it downgrade? I mean, when did it drop off?
the sightings start dropping off after 1987, although sightings were still taking place. But the
And
sightings,
they are to this day?
they are to
on a
this
regular
day.
basis?
They are to this day on a regular basis. However, the sightings now are more of the close encounter category than
Landings?
Not really. I don't really have very few reports of any landings, even though they're there. Most of the cases involve an object close to the ground, blocking a highway where a car was stopped and the people were stopped, and people reported seeing a craft, in many cases some sort of strange alien creatures or entities in the road, blocking the road up in the area. But you have to understand the scenario. In 1982, 1983, there were thousands of UFO reports. Okay? And this is mostly of an object that was about the size of a football field that was seen overhead. At the same time, there were also close encounter cases taking place up in Dutchess County. And these were of a smaller craft of the same design. These sightings of this overhead flights of this giant UFO and the close encounters continued all the way up to 1984 into 1985. After that, the sightings started to taper off. In 1987, they started to pick up again. But this time, the sightings started taking place around New Haven and the coastline of Connecticut and New York, rather than inland, than it taken place before, and Long Island. Then the sightings started dropping off considerably. But the sightings did not stop. The only type of sightings that are taking place now are close encounters. But the interesting thing is, well, close encounter is seeing an object within 200 yards or so. Okay, you know, you have close encounter of the first kind, second kind, and third kind, and fourth kind. First kind is seeing an object within 200 yards. Second type is when the object leaves some type of physical evidence that it was around. The third type is when some type of alien creatures were seen next to the craft. And the fourth time is when actual contact was made between these alien creatures and the individual. But close encounter cases continue. But the interesting thing is that many of the people who had sightings in 1983 and 1984 were again to have close encounter sightings in 1986, 1987, and 1990.
So it's in a sense they were programmed or picked out
I don't know if you...
for a later contact.
Bud Hopkins, the author of Intruders, worked with me, with a lot of people in a lot of cases here. And I asked him, well, what is your opinion why this particular object is flying over the area? And he said, well, I bet you they're probing, looking for people. You know, they would send probes out. I said, well, that sounds a little far-fetched. But then later on, some of the people who had good sightings later on would have a close encounter case and a missing time case. So, you know, Bud Hopkins may be right in his theory that the overflights were merely some type of scanning operation. I don't exactly know. But the real fact is that, you know, there was a real object here. There was government involvement.
There was.
Yeah.
You don't cover that to any degree in the book.
No. You see, when I wrote Night Siege, I wrote it with the late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was professor of astronomy at Northwestern University and probably the world's most foremost authority on UFOs.
And certainly with the government Project Blue Book for 20 years.
Definitely. And Dr. Hynek was a close friend of mine, a mentor, I should say. We wanted to keep all the paranoia. We wanted to keep all the metaphysical, mystical, all the strange stuff out of the book, even though it was there, all the government stuff. We wanted to keep it out of the book. The book is a testimony as to what occurred. It's a report. You see, back when that book was published, it was very, very hard to get a UFO book published back in 1983. Night Siege is one of the first manuscripts that dealt with the UFO phenomenon that was published for that time.
Did you have any problems in publishing it?
Well, the only problems we had is when Dr. Hynek became ill and couldn't continue the book, and I enlisted the aid of Mr. Bob Pratt, a UFO researcher who was down in Florida. There were a lot of stumbling blocks. Just before the publication of the book, I got a call from the Air Force wanting to know the content of the book, stating that they were very concerned about the Hudson Valley sightings, stating that they didn't want to start a UFO panic,
Mm-hmm.
that they were still collecting UFO reports for
Mhm.
that area.
So
And
they were actively involved collecting reports.
so they say.
Mm-hmm.
So the major who called me had me on the phone for 45 minutes. Now you have to imagine the scenario. The Air Force, I got an official letter, first of all, stating I was going to be contacted by a representative of the Air Force. I didn't know how. I got all these scenarios in my mind about people coming up to the door and knocking on the door, you know, the men in black and so on. I really didn't know how, but it came by a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And the fella had me on the phone for 45 minutes. After 30 minutes, I was tired of talking. I was trying to hang up on the guy, but he wouldn't let me go. It was a very pleasant conversation. It was a very concerned conversation, that the Air Force was concerned about what was flying over the Hudson Valley, and they really had no explanation for it. So the bottom line is that they really wanted me to contact them and keep them informed in case new information comes in,
Mm-hmm.
which I agreed to do so. In return, they sent me about 50, 60, 70 documents
Mm-hmm.
of UFO sightings that they had collected in the area. Most of them came from federal aviation officials and so on.
So in return, that was a nice gesture.
It was cooperation. However, some of the documents were censored.
Mm-hmm.
Only the
Sanitized.
information that really, you know, I could use, people's names, situations, government officials, agencies
were
that
removed?
were removed from
Oh.
the document.
Yeah, so it's
But
they're worthless.
But the
Essentially.
basic sighting information is
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I think I was the first civilian to be contacted directly by the Air Force in over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I was involved in at the time caught somebody's eye.
Mm-hmm.
And this fellow who was calling me actually didn't know too much. He was just being ordered to get information. And his orders were coming from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But the book itself is a documentation of what took place. A lot has taken place after that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the phenomenon never sleeps. It dies down, it peaks up, but it never disappears. It never goes away.
Mhm.
It's always there.
How about, I'm curious to know, there are a lot of reported sightings of these craft. How about contact with any of the entities aboard the craft? You know, what experience have you had with that? I mean, encounters.
Well, since 1989, see what happens when people have UFO encounters.
Mm-hmm.
If they're very bizarre encounters, most people don't talk about them for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years later, some people will come out and start talking about their sightings.
Mm-hmm.
Whitley Strieber, who wrote the book Communion,
Mm-hmm.
lives in the Hudson Valley. He uses the Hudson Valley case to give more support to his argument that he was abducted by aliens, saying,
Mm-hmm.
look at all these sightings in the area, it happened the same time that I had these experiences, you know, why won't you believe me?
Does he claim the same type of beings as
Yes.
these that pilot these craft?
More or less the
Yeah.
same, yes.
Does he identify that craft, that boomerang-shaped craft?
He identifies a similar craft
Yeah.
that he's seen in the area and entities. I don't agree with everything that's in that book.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of it's the truth or how much of it's
Yeah.
a fantasy. But I will say that, you know, he probably did have some real UFO experiences. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
What his book did, when many people read it, it encouraged them to come forward with their story.
Yeah.
And that's one benefit it had. Since the publication of that book in 1987, by 1988, 1989, I've already looked into 75 cases of so-called contact with the intelligence behind the UFO.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the contact is not on the, in other words, it's not with the consent of the person. They're
Mhm.
taken by force.
Mm-hmm.
These entities are usually coming into their house and taking them out, the entire family, or they're driving on the road, the automobile's being stopped, they're being taken out of their car. And in many cases, the object is passing overhead, and it's almost like as if they're beamed out of their car and into the ship.
Oh, yeah.
And they can feel themselves going through the roof of the car and going down a long black funnel and being drawn into an area on the craft where there's a table and there's a dark room and they're laying on the table. and these entities are around them performing some type of procedures. The entities are described as being in black suits with large heads, gray, large eyes, black eyes. There's hardly any communication between the victim and these entities.
Is it telepathic though?
In some cases, and in one particular case, this fellow was down at Route 116, and he was taken aboard, and he felt, when he woke and found himself on a table inside this object with these entities around him, and he was paralyzed. And they were inserting something up into his nose. And it hurt him really bad. After a while, he was allowed to get up, and there were two little creatures next to him. They were leading him around the room that he was in. He said they were only up to his chest, and he was about 5'10". He described them as having very long arms, very long fingers, with large heads, no ears, very large black eyes, hardly any lips whatsoever, very clay-like skin. And he said to them, "Where are you from?" And the being that was with him, he said he could hear what he was thinking. He knew what he was thinking, although he did not hear any type of voice. And the entity replied that we are from here. He didn't understand the question. And he said, "Well, why are you here?" And he says, "Well, where they come from, it's a uglier place, and they would like to live here, but they can't. And they're doing everything they can so they won't die out as a species, so that they can live here, because where they come from is they can't live there anymore. They said it's an ugly place now." To make a long story short, he felt that something was placed inside of his brain, and that he was giving information. For example, he said something interesting. He said, "Well, I would be walking down the street, and I would see something, and I would hear music, and I would like the music." And he said he could hear a voice inside his head saying, "Describe music. How does it make you feel?" He said one thing they don't understand, he said, is our emotions. He says they don't understand our emotions. And that's just one of many, many cases.
So they're saying they want to live here in cohabitation with us.
Well, maybe that's the story. I don't know exactly. You see, the only thing that I can report to you is that this fellow definitely did have a UFO sighting. Whether or not the abduction experience was fantasized as a product of that sighting, I don't know. You see, he had no conscious memory of the sighting. He had missing time. The only thing he remembers, he's stopping his car as objects going overhead, and he's opening up the door and sitting on the door of his car, on the window. Next thing he realizes that it's an hour later, and he's driving down the road in a car. He'd wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats.
So he didn't have a conscious memory?
Didn't have a conscious recollection whatsoever. He would wake up in the middle of the night, cold sweats, and wondering what was going on, feel as if something was going to get him. He was afraid to go out at nights. And that's a pattern with all the people that I've researched in the area who've had abductions. They feel as if something's going to get them. They feel something's going to come and grab them. They feel very insecure about going out at night from now on. And they feel as if there was something else to them, as if they had a presence about them. Something else was inside them. So he is a computer engineer. Now, I really don't deal with these cases myself. I do the basic investigation into the sighting, into the abduction. Then, if I think it's a good case, I'll refer them to a professor of psychology down at Long Island University, who is a certified psychologist. She does a complete psychological workup on the person, then uses regressive hypnosis. And all of this information was brought out under hypnosis. Then she slowly let the person know exactly what was going on. She started out as a skeptic, but now, you see, she's certain that these people experience something that they considered very real. People aren't looking for publicity. They don't even want their names used. but they had nothing to gain by saying, hey, I've been abducted by aliens. The people that I've talked to range from all walks of life. In other words, these alien guys, whoever they are, aren't picking out, the lawyers or the doctors or the psychics or anything. They're picking up across a range of people. Doctors, lawyers, educators, factory workers, police officers, scientists have all been abducted in this area. One thing that we did find out is that there seems to be some connection between the people who've had close encounters and a childhood experience. Under hypnosis, a good percentage of the people, I don't exactly know the percentage, but it was a very high percentage of the people, as soon as they were relating their UFO sighting, they regressed back through their childhood when some type of entity appeared in their bedroom. So contact of this nature by this intelligence may have been made at a very early age with these people. And later on, contact was reestablished. Contact by who? You got me.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, the Hudson Valley is only one area in which this massive display of UFOs took place. In other words, it seems that across the world, whatever they are, they're scanning areas. Scanning. And later on, these people, certain people, would later on have a closer encounter. In the Belgium sightings.
Yeah. Same craft.
The object was very, very similar to the Hudson Valley. Matter of fact, Patrick Farron, who one of the chief investigators there, said, he said, when I read the introduction to Night Siege, just changing a few words in a few situations, it could have been what happened here. All the sightings were almost exactly the same, the experiences. Now, I would bet that in about a year from now, they're going to start getting reports of people who've been abducted. I think it's going to follow the same.
Oh, they
pattern.
haven't had yet?
No, they haven't. When
None
they were
reported.
investigating. I don't know if they've had reports now, but I would be very, very interested to find out if they do. And I would bet my bottom dollar that they're going to start getting reports of people who've been abducted in that area, just like in the Hudson Valley. Other places of the world pattern also after
The
Hudson
same
Valley.
craft is seen in Puerto Rico.
Sure, and Wyeth County, Virginia.
Oh, really?
The same object. Thursday nights, same sighting day, same time span.
Oh, really? Is that a
same
consistent
situation.
sighting that has
Yes.
been going on?
Yes, it also, you see, it took place shortly after the Hudson Valley sightings and continued for about a year or so. There was a book written on it called Don't Look Up. It really didn't make it into the mass market. It's one of those books that you'd have to special order. Fortunately, Night Siege made it into the mass market media. And it's a documentation and on record of what took place. Now, to say about the book is that when the show Unsolved Mysteries wanted to do UFO Show for the beginning of the year, and they picked the Hudson Valley case, the researchers were very, very surprised that everything in that book was very accurate. When they called the people and they said, well, did you read it? And they said, yes. And he said, well, that's like 90% accurate of what happened to me. And they were like very, very surprised that the research was done so well, and that the accounts were not exaggerated. They were exactly the way they happened. And I think that impressed them because the people said, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. Not like, oh, that didn't happen to me or was exaggerated or so on. The skeptics of UFOs have stayed away from criticizing this book because it was so well documented. How could it be otherwise? I mean, look who was looking over my shoulder when the research was being
Alan
done.
Hynek,
Professor of astronomy.
yeah.
His reputation is on the line with anything that comes out with his name on it. So the research had to be documented, it had to be rechecked. I mean, I felt like I was doing a graduate paper again when I was doing this work. I mean, it was just not just sitting in an armchair, calling up people, writing down a bunch of facts, trying to put in a bunch of romantic language, like a lot of writers do, trying to sell their books. I mean, I felt like as if I was doing research again, and this professor was ready to grade my paper. That's how exactly it was.
Well, it shows in the book. It's good documentation. Let's see. So, then, these sightings have been occurring consistently, then, let's say, for quite a long time. Why why do you assume that it's occurring in this area, and you know, in New England and New York? Why? Why are they concentrating their activities in these areas, and over Long Island as well?
Well, that's a hard question. And to really say I know the answer would be speculation. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to speculate.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Dr. Hynek the same question.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, look for windows. Didn't really know what he meant at the time.
Yeah.
Said, look for windows. He said there's a reason why UFOs appear in certain areas. And we have found areas in the Hudson Valley that are very strong in the magnetic anomalies.
Mm-hmm. Explain a magnetic anomaly.
Well, a magnetic anomaly is where you have an increase in the Earth's magnetic field or a great deflection in the Earth's magnetic field causing a magnetic anomaly,
mm-hmm.
or a positive magnetic anomaly. In a positive magnetic
Is it something
anomaly,
in relation to the general, the magnetic field around the body?
That's right. We're encased in a magnetic field right now, the Earth's
mm-hmm.
magnetic field. In some areas, this magnetic field is greatly intensified.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in some areas, it's even less.
Mm-hmm.
We found areas in the Hudson Valley where the magnetic anomalies were very, very great.
Mm-hmm.
And these areas also coincided with the appearance of the UFO.
Mm-hmm.
What we did is we took the sightings and we plotted the direction and location on a map.
Mm-hmm.
They showed a pattern that the sightings were radiating from a central area. The center of the Hudson Valley case, where the phenomena radiated from,
Mm-hmm.
is an area in Kent Cliffs, New York. Coincidentally enough, this area has the highest magnetic anomaly in the area.
Mm-hmm.
What is the connection between magnetic anomalies and UFOs? Dr. Hynek believed that UFOs could travel interdimensionally. He always talked about a parallel reality. He said if UFOs were just as simple as a visitor from another world, it would be easy. But he believed that UFOs were more exotic than just visitors from another world.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about interdimensional beings, metaphysical beings that been here on this planet.
I'd never heard him make that comment. Generally, his comparisons were very much more within the parameters of our physical laws.
Yes, he would be,
which are limited to.
He would be very, very conservative.
Yeah.
Because he was always under scrutiny by the scientific world.
But he would open up.
Oh yes, he believed that the UFOs were interdimensional.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't believe that they were solid nuts and bolts spaceships from another world.
Mm-hmm.
But I really don't believe that either.
Yeah.
UFOs appear too much like ghost stories. They can reappear and disappear.
Yeah. They're operating in other levels of reality that we're not aware of.
They can travel interdimensionally, and that's why they appear and disappear. Magnetic anomalies can be used to warp space. When you warp space, you can enter another dimension. I mean, science fiction writers have been doing it for years, but it is possible in theory that if we can bend space, twist space, actually turn space inside out and travel from one place to another place very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
A magnetic disturbance, a magnetic anomaly could do this.
Mm-hmm.
If a magnetic anomaly is taken, artificially enhanced by some process aboard their vehicle,
mm-hmm.
they can warp space around them and disappear and reappear in and out of our universe,
mm-hmm.
into somewhere else. They can travel across the galaxy in a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have UFOs appearing and disappearing in the Hudson Valley. Poof, they're there. Next minute, they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
They disappear and reappear. They're not becoming invisible. I think that they're disappearing in and out of our universe.
Mm.
And they're using these magnetic anomalies to do so.
Right.
For years, we've always wondered why UFOs are attracted to high-tension power lines. People were thinking they were sucking the electricity. They don't need the electricity. We know today that high-tension power lines produce an electromagnetic pulse.
Mm-hmm.
This is very dangerous to humans, especially.
Yeah, we've just been finding that out. Yeah.
I believe these electromagnetic pulses are used by the UFOs as some type of method to make a window in the space-time continuum.
So, I mean, it's probably hypothetical, but how does that occur? I mean, are they just using are they amplifying the the radiations from the electrical wires and then somehow inserting them into their, propulsion system, or you
Well,
follow what I'm saying? Are they tapping those waves and sucking them in for their...
The electromagnetic pulse is probably generated from the power line, and the electromagnetic pulse generates around the area, and now you have an area of a magnetic anomaly there because of this. So somehow the object is taking the electromagnetic pulse, whether it's naturally produced or artificially produced, and enhancing it somewhere to bend space around it so that it can disappear and reappear. This is about the only sense that I could make out of it. I've been doing some work with UFOs and the appearance of UFOs over reservoirs. UFO investigators for years have wondered why UFOs were attracted to bodies of water. Are they contaminating the water, tampering with it? No.
Yeah, in Bill Herman's case, they were doing, hydro experiments with water in South America. They admitted to be doing, here involved in experiments with bodies of water, different types of waters.
Yes, up in the Hudson Valley here, we have many cases where the UFO appeared over bodies of water. I wanted to determine whether or not this was a natural body of water or an artificial body of water. In all the cases where the UFO was seen over the water, it was over an artificial body of water, a reservoir, a lake, or so on. And also, in these areas of these artificial lakes was a magnetic anomaly where the UFO was present. How was the magnetic anomaly produced? I found out something interesting. In the area where these lakes are, the entire Brewster area, going up into Kent, Croton Falls, Mayapack, this area was once mined for iron ore. This area is laced with magnetite, very high grade iron ore. You can still see a lot of the deposits around the area in some of the mines down in Croton Falls. The lakes that were dug out were dug down to the layer of magnetite, and the water was placed on top of it, exposing the anomaly more strongly. The natural lakes did not dig down to the magnetite. Thus, the anomaly was much weaker, if non-existent at all. The UFOs have picked those artificial lakes where it was dug down deep enough to expose more of the anomaly going through the water.
So in the artificial, they dug down until they couldn't dig anymore.
Right.
They dug down to the underground.
That's right. A lot of people still complain about a lot of residue in the water around here. There's a lot of iron ore in the water and so on because of this factor.
So is the water somehow amplifying the signal?
It channels it through, just like, see, water, when it has minerals in it, is a good conductor of electricity. It's also a good conductor of electromagnetic pulse. Anybody who's a ham radio operator will tell you that if they go next to the water, especially if it has a lot of salt in it or minerals, and they transmit their signal, it'll bounce across the water. It's a good conductor of it's like using an antenna. So this electromagnetic pulse is like going through an antenna. You see, and it's focused over that lake. And the UFOs appear over there, disappeared over there.
So like appearing over a high tension wire, they seem to be maybe interested in that anomaly, and they're using it in their power systems?
They're using it, I think, to warp space for this jump between dimensions, to disappear and reappear. If this intelligence, why go over to a high tension power line and risk the chance of being seen by so many people?
It's occurred in Puerto Rico, the Exeter.
Right, but they still do it anyway. But if you got an area where there's a magnetic anomaly, especially over a reservoir, and you could use that just as efficiently, and you could go away undetected, you can do that. Because every time these UFOs have appeared over these power lines, there's cases in the Hudson Valley also, there's also been an amount of power that has dropped or a power increase. And this has been registered in the Hudson Valley, timed when the particular UFO was over the power lines up in Route 6, near Montrose and Peekskill and Jefferson Valley, the high-tension power lines up there. So the UFO was timed there, and there were also surges in power and drops in power. Also up in Thomasville and Hartford, Connecticut, when the UFO was seen over the power lines, there was a surge in power that sped up the clocks. So everybody woke up in the morning, and the clocks were much faster. Everybody was going to work a lot earlier. So there is a definite connection between this EMP, this electromagnetic pulse, and the appearance of UFOs. I don't think it's the main source of propulsion, but I think they utilize it for whatever they do to disappear and reappear, to travel interdimensionally. And that's the only thing that could explain why UFOs can disappear and reappear. They're traveling interdimensionally. They go into the fourth dimension, an area we can't see. I mean, we can look up, we can look down, we can look to the left, we can look to the right, but the fourth dimension is an area that we can't see, a direction we can't turn to look into that area.
What do you assume the properties of that fourth dimension are?
I don't know. It's probably a very exotic place.
Yeah.
But it would be very, very strange. You have to think of it from a two-dimensional state.
Yeah.
A two-dimensional being can only see directly in front of him and back of him and to the sides. If I put my finger in front of a two-dimensional being, all he sees is the bottom. And I lift it away, it disappears. I put it in front of him and it reappears. I pick him up, he disappears from all his little friends, and he's looking around in this new world. He sees your face, he sees my face, he sees the camera, he sees the light, and he's all freaked out. I put him back down again, and his friends say, "Where'd you go?" He tries to turn to that direction to look, but he can't point upwards because that's where he was. Same thing with us, but of course in a more complex nature. So it seems to me that the UFOs are able to go four-dimensional.
To access it. And one aspect of that other dimension seems to be electromagnetic or gravitational reality.
Exactly.
That's definitely connected. It may explain why we know so little about gravity, and electromagnetic, forces.
Exactly. I mean, there's just so much involved with the UFOs. It's just more than UFO crashes and alien bodies. I mean, there's a whole science here. And to quote Dr.
It's more
Hynek,
of a biological awakening than
it's not the realm of any particular discipline. To quote Dr. Hynek, he said, the UFOs, whatever they represent a science of the 21st century. Right now, we don't have the technology or the know-how to explain what they are and how they do it. I mean, what would it be like for you going back into time in the 17th century and trying to explain nuclear power to somebody and how the sun was powered? They couldn't comprehend it. So it's the same thing today when we're looking at UFOs. We try to identify the UFO phenomena in human terms, crashes, alien bodies, and so on. But we don't know if that's the case. UFO phenomena may not even be a physical entity. The reason why we don't have pieces that fall to the ground because there may not be any pieces to pick up. We hear many stories about the U.S. government, alien bodies recovered, crashed objects. But then again, how much of that is true? We don't know. The only thing that we can do as private investigators, researchers, is take whatever we know and apply it to the UFOs and try to make some sense out of this. For example, my background is astronomy. I'm chairman of the science department at a school. And not only do I write UFO books, but my work has been published in scientific journals. I do a lot of research with satellite imaging. So I take my discipline and apply it to the UFO phenomena. And I could see a lot of sense being made out of this. This is not just a new age sort of thing. This is a real scientific thing that can be explained in scientific terms.
And what the underlying reality is implies itself to change within the whole world. I mean, it affects every system that we've created.
It really does.
It dramatically alters and changes every system we've ever created.
It really does.
Yeah.
And
It'd be great.
So we see that the UFO phenomena is not restricted to any particular discipline. It's not restricted to the New Age psychic. I think there's a lot of good scientific information here. There are a lot of scientists like myself who are secretly investigating that do not make their work too public. Years ago, we used to call ourselves the Invisible College. Today, we're a little more open. I was one of the later members of that. But there is a lot of good pay dirt here. It is a very real phenomenon, and there is an intelligence behind it. And the purpose of that intelligence, I don't know if it's good or bad. Anytime I think a person is taken against their will, can't be good. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not just like, in Jean-Luc Picard aboard Starship Enterprise, they have their first contact, they beam in to the people and they say, well, here we are, if you want us to go, we'll go. These guys just come in and grab you and they take you. For example, one person said to me, he said, he said, I was so scared, he said. He said, it didn't matter if I fought them, if I protested. These guys were so cold, they had a job to do, and they were going to do it no matter what, he said. That's the way he felt. As if they did this every day. It was like routine for them. They were very unemotional about them. They just wanted to get you on the table, do their exams, so they can go home and have their dinner or something. Just get it over with. It was a job to them, he said. They were very unemotional about it. So there is an intelligence behind it. And I think that intelligence has been with us for a very, very long time. We have ancient cultures, the Druids, the American Indian, some of the European cultures, the Celts, that worshipped what they called earth spirits, which bear a striking resemblance to our appearance of UFOs, and the beings, a striking resemblance to our UFO entities of today. Now, in the Hudson Valley, we plotted all the cases of high strangeness on a map. And we were a little surprised to find out that all of these cases of high strangeness were centered in very small areas of about a half of a mile diameter. I mean, then we took our information and we did it again. I mean, it wasn't like the sightings were just like all over the place, with a central point radiating from Kent Cliffs. But the cases of high strangeness, entities, unusual glows of light close to the ground, appearance of strange creatures, abductions, electromagnetic phenomena, and so on. These are cases of high strangeness. They were centered in little areas. When we went out to these areas to explore them, we always found some type of carved strange stone, a chamber that was cut from rock that has been there for so long, the residents and the people don't even know who built these things. Even the American Indians don't have legends on who built them. They have legends of the people who came from over the sea with the red beards and the horns on their heads and the blue eyes.
Which are the Dreads or the Celts?
Yes,
or
somewhere.
Scandinavians?
Or Scandinavians, or maybe even the Irish. And of course, the first religion, one of the first oldest religions for the British Isles was Druidism.
Druidism, yeah.
And we know there was a connection between the Druids and the UFOs. Now, what connection does this have with the Hudson Valley case? Well, these areas of magnetic anomalies in the Hudson Valley were also identified with the locations of these stones and chambers. So in other words, whoever built them a long time ago knew exactly where the anomaly was and built a temple there. I think they're temples and markers. Why? Because that's what their religion was, to build a temple where the earth spirits were. All right, that's good enough. But we know that the chamber, the temple, the stone was built in the Hudson Valley where the anomaly is. How can we verify this? Well, we had a scientist from the Lamont Doherty Observatory come down with a magnetometer, and he did chart the anomalies. There was a real anomaly in these areas. Very intense, that could not be naturally produced. It was artificially induced.
So he could notice this on basically the surface. These areas, a large geographic area, showed an anomaly.
It was so strong that the area showed anomaly. But the anomaly itself was centered in a very small area within about 10 feet from the chamber or the stone. It was focused on purpose in that particular area. One of the fascinating things is that before we did this magnetometer reading, I had a psychic go down, and she went and felt exactly where the energy was focused. The magnetic anomaly was focused. She was very accurate, almost exactly to where the magnetometer said it was. The survey was done 6 months apart or so. So the point is this. perhaps 2,000, 3,000 years ago, these Druid people came over. They had a very strong religion that had something to do with the UFO phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
Their priests came over with them who were sensitives. They were able to sense the anomalies and say, here's where you build a temple.
Mm-hmm.
These structures in the Hudson Valley are not placed randomly.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of these structures are in Kent Cliffs, New York also,
Mm-hmm.
which is not far from here. And they built these temples because this is where the earth spirits manifest.
Explain what you mean when they built them. What, they hollowed out the earth?
No, they cut stone, mostly quartzite, and they built the walls, and the walls come on in angles.
They carved into the
No,
stone.
they took the stone from the bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
They cut the stone into blocks.
Oh, and built these
And
chambers.
built, the walls come up to an angle, and then they placed these enormous slabs of rock on for a roof. 5 or 6 of them, or 4 of them, depending on the size of the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Then they stuck little rocks in to fill up the holes. The largest chamber is about 45 feet long, and it's about 6 or 7 feet high. The smallest one's only a few feet long.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you an idea. Plus some of the stones in the area, the carved stones, the standing stone, the balancing stone down in North Salem, all are markers. And these particular chambers, these temples, were built in areas of magnetic anomalies where there's been a lot of strange activity. It coincides with the appearance of the UFOs and the religion of these Druid people, so to speak, who worshipped UFOs in some way, or identified them as part of their religion. So the connection is that there's a very, very ancient culture that came here that also saw the same manifestations that we're seeing today in these particular areas.
Mm-hmm.
Back then they identified them as gods and earth spirits and so on. Today we're calling them aliens and UFOs.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a connection there. There's no doubt about it.
Do you
There's over
find the
100
same
chambers.
connection with the crop formations in England?
I had breakfast with Colin Andrews about last year, a year and a half ago. I started mentioning chambers to him. And I found out that a lot of the activity was in areas where I think that these Druids came over here and they built these chambers and they had this sacred ground. His eyes started tearing. He said that he found very similar, his work, it's very similar that the areas of the crop circles were on Druid sacred ground.
Mm-hmm.
So these particular areas where these manifestations occur, you see, were identified by this very ancient culture.
Mm-hmm.
I believe these people came over here about 3,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have been here looking for copper and iron and so on, and started colonizing. They came up the Hudson River, and then another group came down the St. Lawrence River. The American Indian met with them and lived with them for a very long time. And these chambers that are in the Hudson Valley, and also found up in New Hampshire and Massachusetts and Vermont, are the remnants of these ancient culture that came here. In the Hudson Valley, I found 2 chambers that had stones in them. The stones had a carving. Carving was identical in both chambers. Looking at it for a very long time, there's no doubt. It's the Pleiades.
Mm-hmm.
And in my lecture that I give involving the stone chambers, which I'm going to give in North Haven, at John White's the Omega UFO conference, I'm going to give this presentation from our recent research. I hold up a picture of the Pleiades I took, and a picture of the carving in the stone. Even the stars below it, Aldebaran, and one of the stars of the horns of Taurus are carved on the rock.
Mm-hmm.
What significance does this have? The Druid people had a very high holiday. That was a time when the constellation of the Pleiades was directly overhead at midnight. That was a time when the earth spirits, the UFOs, were at their strongest peak. When the Pleiades is directly overhead at midnight, it's what we call today Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
It was considered a pagan holiday because it was part of the old religion that was outlawed by the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
So it was later identified as being demons and devils and Satan and all that stuff there, when actually it was the old religion, which they identified as being evil and paganism. This is some of the evidence that I've acquired that these things were actually built by Druid or pre-Druid people.
Mm-hmm.
The stone chambers that are found here have a striking resemblance to the way they were cut to similar structures found in Ireland.
Why do you think there's a connection to the Pleiades? I mean, why? Because they were honoring the Pleiadian star system because they assumed that that's where their ancestors came from, or their relatives, or whatever. What was the connection to the Pleiades? Why do you assume that?
Well,
because that occurs in Nazca as well, with some connections to the Pleiades.
Well, you have to remember that the Pleiades is a very strange-looking thing in the sky.
Mm.
It glitters, and when 2,000 years ago, when there were no electric lights, it probably shone quite bright. Every culture has a story about it. Not only the Druids and the Africans and the South Americans and so on, but just about every culture on Earth has a story about it because it is a very prominent thing in the sky. It looks very strange in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So when this particular constellation was directly overhead, it marked October at midnight. October is also the time, the first full moon usually after the fall equinox. So there may be something between the position of the Earth in space and the Sun that triggered a very high magnetic pulse from the Earth at this time.
Oh.
And they just used the Pleiades at that time because it was a very strange-looking, prominent thing that was directly overhead. And the Pleiades to them did have some mystical origin because of the way it looked. In other words, it didn't look like the rest of the stars. So therefore, it must be something very dynamic, as were the planets.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any connection between these visitors coming from there. I think it's just because it looks strange in the sky that they attributed this connection. Many different cultures did that. They took objects, astronomical objects, and based a lot of their religion on it.
Yeah.
One thing also, talking about constellations, there may have been some European influence in North America at that time. One of the reasons is that the constellation of Ursa Major, the Big Bear, the Greeks and the American Indian are the only cultures in the world that identify this constellation as a bear with a tail, and bears don't have tails. So this is one of the mysteries. Some people think that the east coast of the United States was in fact colonized by not only these ancient Druids or pre-Celts, but also maybe the Greeks also came here, and some Egyptians also came here, and some cultures from the Iberian Peninsula during the Bronze Age. So we still have a lot to learn about ancient archaeology in North America.
Yeah.
But these chambers and these stones are remnants, I think, of these ancient cultures that did visit here. And they came here with their religion, and it ties in a lot with the appearance of a lot of paranormal phenomena in those areas because they knew exactly where to build their temples, where their gods, the energy of their gods was the strongest.
Have local archaeologists known of these chambers?
Oh, yes. Everybody seems to be afraid to deal with them because there's like a New Age connection with them right now. Some people have, in fact, come out to say that they were not built in recent times. They are very ancient. An archaeologist up in Massachusetts by the name of Sal Trento was convinced that they were very, very old. A scientist by the name of Barry Feller wrote a book, America BC, thinks that they're very old. Some archaeologists will say that they were built by colonials. But there's a lot of evidence against that. The stones are too weathered, number one, for colonial times. There's about 100 chambers in different states of decay. The number of chambers would rule out what could be used by colonial farmers.
Yeah.
And also there are chambers found where there were no colonials at all. It was Indian country. So there's a lot of evidence against it. Also, the chambers are not found on the west side of the Hudson. They're only found on the east side of the Hudson.
Huh. Odd.
And the reason why is because on the east side of the Hudson you have a lot of granite, you have a lot of quartz, and this was the select stone for these chambers. On the west side of the Hudson, it's replaced by a lot of slate and shale. So in order to build a chamber properly, you'd have to cut the stone and transport it across the Hudson, which
Yeah.
I don't think was going to be done.
Yeah.
So this type of stone, its selection, its location, was all planned. And the Druid priests were probably very sensitive, like that woman who came out and felt where the anomalies were. They probably were able to feel where the anomaly was strongest. And they probably did build some temple to their, what they worshipped, what we're seeing today in the area is UFOs. And also the American Indian has legends in these areas of earth spirits being there. And a lot of the areas where the temples were, they still have Indian legends. Minham Mountain, named after an Indian chief. There's a temple there. There's a whole ceremonial area in the back with a quartz altar behind it and everything. Nobody ever found. I uncovered it myself.
So the Indians were using these?
No, it seems that the Indians would stay away from them because they were afraid of them. But later on, it came to fact that maybe some of the Indians in the area were using some of them for sweat houses and things like that. Also, some of the chambers were used later on by colonial farmers for storage. And today, even some of the chambers are being used by local residents for storage and stuff. Some people have even put doors on them. I mean, after 3,000 years, these things are still waterproof. They're still built very strong, and they're still standing. And people have reported very bizarre experiences in them, including not only seeing UFOs and UFO-like phenomena, but also seeing appearance of what they considered ghosts of people in long white robes with black beards and big black eyes, and people with horns and red beards and furs for skins appearing in these areas, yes. Some very, very bizarre stories. The whole thing ties in with this magnetic anomaly effect, UFOs, and paranormal phenomena. One interesting thing, just before the UFOs started in the area, the entire area from Westchester County, Putnam County, and Dutchess County had an explosion of paranormal phenomena. Poltergeists, apparitions, psychic phenomena. The amount of people who are coming forth claiming clairvoyance, and it would increase 300%.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever triggered the UFOs was a generation of energy that generated this also phenomena. Also, when the UFOs disappeared, it died down, there was also a burst of, once again, paranormal phenomena. That was unbelievable. The whole area was just a psychic explosion. The connection is that with this burst of energy, it was the side effects. The second effects was that it was generating a lot of this paranormal phenomena, electromagnetic phenomena especially too. Light bulbs exploding, appliances going on in the house, tables being turned over. A lot of things like this was going on. People waking up seeing beams of light in their room, and globes of light flying right through the windows, flying around the room, and flying back out again. Strange things like this. The Hudson Valley is probably a very rich area in folklore. So I can see why, because this phenomena has been around here a long time, has generated a lot of stories ever since colonial days and before that. In 100 years from now, if we're still on this earth, the Hudson Valley UFO is going to become part of American folklore. We'll talk about, my grandfather said there was this enormous thing in the sky. It'll be like some of the legends, but the legends will go on. We're making the legends of tomorrow.
Yeah, that's exciting about it,
That's really all I have to say.